You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Before I introduce our guest, and she has a very nice name, I have to say, a different name. I never heard this name before. But before I do, I want to say thank you so much, like always. I want to say thank you to everybody who is listening to the show. I have listeners in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in Africa. We have listeners in Europe, in Latin America. And so I'm very thankful to all of you. It's been more than 11 years doing this show, so I'm very happy. And tonight is a very interesting interview. We have with us jYOTSNA. She's going to tell us exactly how to pronounce her name in a little bit, but she's the accessibility testing program manager at Google. So as you can imagine, it's exciting to have someone like that on the show. So jYOTSNA, thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy lady.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.
Can you, for our listeners, tell us your full name?
Sure. My name is jYOTSNA Kaki.
Okay. So very nice, very nice. So jYOTSNA, I would like to know, first of all, what is the cause of your blindness?
Well, I'm a patient of craniopharyngioma. It's a brain tumor. And back in 2004, I had a surgery to extract the tumor. As a side effect, they traumatized my optic nerve, so which caused my loss of vision. But the thing was, I was pretty much either born or lost vision in one of my eyes at a very young age because of the tumor. But I had plenty enough of vision to do everything normally, including driving. But in 2004, I lost my second eye as well. Yeah.
So if I am correct, you were studying in college when you became blind?
Yes, I was actually in my final year of college.
Oh, wow. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? How it was that?
So I was actually, it was in November of 2004. I had applied for my graduation the following May, and I was approved to graduate. And I was living in the dorms, doing all my education and everything. And one evening, middle of the night, I woke up to use the restroom, and I woke up, I observed like my vision was blurry. And I thought maybe I got something in my eye. I was like, I just want to go back to bed. So I went and I used the restroom. I went back to bed. But I woke up the next morning and my blurry vision was still there. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on. I washed my face, I washed my eye, everything, it was still blurry. But I just continued with my classes and everything, which was really a struggle because when you have such blurry vision, it's really hard to see the whiteboard or reading paper and everything. But I just somehow managed for a couple of days till I came home. And when I notified my parents are like, oh my God, you should have told us earlier. And they immediately took me to the doctor. And the doctor did an MRI and he said, well, the tumor is putting pressure on the optic nerve. That's why she's seeing blurry. It's an emergency. We should do a surgery immediately to remove the tumor. So at least it stops putting the pressure. And during the surgery, they actually traumatized the optic nerve. So I ended up becoming completely blind.
Wow. Do you remember your first thought about it, saying, okay, now what do I do? What should I do?
So the thing was probably because it was a brain surgery that I was under very, very heavy medication. I don't recall almost for a couple of days after my surgery, but my mom says that when I woke up, I asked my mom, I can't see. And my mom said, yes, honey. And I was like, why? Is it just because it was a big surgery, so it's a temporary thing? My mom is like, no. And she said, I then asked, well, does that mean I'm blind? And she was like, yes. And she said, I started crying and she ran to get the doctor. By the time the doctor collected the psychiatrist and he brought them to the room, I had stopped crying. And pretty much I was done. My mom said, right after the doctor left, I asked my brother to come to me and I told him to go find out how the Disability Resource Center in our college can help me get back to college and move on and everything. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll have time to talk a little bit more later about this, but when you were in college and you were saying, okay, now I cannot see, what kind of tools should I get? How did you decide which tools to use and how did you find them?
So the college I actually went to is San Jose State University, which is in the Bay Area, California. And they actually have a very good disability resource center. And call it coincidence, but I never knew about the center almost up till the semester before I lost my vision. And it just happened as a coincidence. The semester before, there was a student who needed assistance to take notes. And when I volunteered to do that, they said, well, if you need more carbon paper, you can go pick it up from the center. And it was actually the Disability Resource Center. So when I went there, I read up as to how they help students and everything. And I was like, this is interesting. So when I lost my vision, I pretty much did not research online or anything. I contacted the Disability Resource Center and I told them, look, here's my situation. I've lost my vision. My goal is to get back to college as soon as I can. I want to get back to doing my classes. What can you do for me? And they basically, they have a training center, like an adaptive training center. They sent me to the center and I took the semester. So I got back to college in January of 2005. And once I went back to college, so because I had lost my vision in November for the surgery, I had to take withdrawal from all the classes I was enrolled in. So in January, I went to the center and they taught me how to use JAWS on a Windows computer. And simultaneously, I also enrolled with the Santa Clara County to learn Braille simultaneously. So I started off with that technology and I learned Braille, learned how to use JAWS specifically on Windows, mainly because I figured that's what I was needed for me to complete my education.
Wow, this is like, you should write a book or something about this. Because jYOTSNA, for our listeners, as I am listening to your wonderful story, I have to say, very inspiring, I say to myself, she pushed herself. In other words, you said, this is not going to stop me. Yes, it may be complicated, of course, but I can make it happen. You know, I need to go on with my life. I need to move forward. And that's what you did. And that's very important for our listeners as a lesson. You know, everybody's situation is different, of course, but it's very important always to move forward. And that's what I have been saying all along for more than 11 years. And I have done many interviews with people who lost their sight in a second, and everything changes, and you need to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? And life is not ending for our listeners. Has changed, but it doesn't end there. It's a new beginning. And jYOTSNA is a great example of that.
Actually, on the same note, I would also like to say, one thing that did help me get over my situation is the fact that I went back to college and got myself back in the spot immediately.
Right.
Because I believe instead of going back to college, if I had taken a break, I probably would have gotten into depression because I would have thought about my situation and then gotten sad about it. But given the fact that I went back to college immediately, and I was so busy with learning Braille, mobility training, screen reading software, all of that in combination. So when I finished my semester and I had summer break, when I actually had time to think, I was like, what am I going to be sad about? I can do everything I used to do when I had my vision, except for maybe driving. That's it. So I think that is probably an important thing, is not to allow an idle mind, because an idle mind can be an evil mind.
Totally agree with you for our listeners. Now, something fascinating when I was reading your biography, and I have read some articles that have been written about you and interviews done with you, something that I said I need to ask her for our listeners is, when you arrive at Google, when you decide that it's important to disclose your disability with the employer, in this case, Google, and in whatever case it may be for our listeners who are looking for work and they are unsure of what to do, what is your take on that situation that sometimes is controversial and people are afraid of saying, okay, you don't know me yet in person, guess what? I have a disability.
Yeah. Honestly speaking, in a sense, the job that I do probably arose from the fact that I have the disability.
Right.
What I mean by that is I had my undergrad in business as management information systems. But after losing my vision, I figured that would be harder for me to accomplish. So let me figure out what is alternate. But more than that, I realized that there were so many websites which were inaccessible, which I were struggling to use. And that's when I ended up deciding to get into this field of accessibility. Now, for some reason, it never struck me in my mind that I should ever try to hide my disability, because I felt like that, knowing my disability on the employer side, that would probably be a bonus on my end, because that would prove somebody with a disability would have a better understanding of how to make this world more accessible. And personally speaking, even over time, as I've been at Google, I have seen many other individuals disclose whether it's a visible or invisible disability to Google, because I feel like Google is definitely an equal opportunity employer, and they never, at least not that I know of, have held it against the individual if they have disclosed that they have a disability.
Very important, jYOTSNA, what you are saying to our listeners. Now, okay, you arrive at Google and you say to them, okay, so in terms of accommodations, I need what?
So that's also kind of an interesting thing that has evolved over time. So given the fact that Google is the first company, corporate world, my first experience with the corporate world, I wasn't sure what or how much I could ask for. So when I started at Google, I was very reserved, thinking, hey, maybe somehow I slipped through the cracks and got hired at Google. Maybe if they realize who I really am, they'll say, get out. So I was very reserved. And at the same time, I thought, hey, I should not ask for too much, because if I ask for too much, they'll be like, oh, she's too demanding. Let's just get rid of her. So I was very conservative when I started. But within the year or so, I soon realized that's not the case. What most companies care about is, after all, I mean, they have big pockets and big bank accounts. After all, they're not about spending the money, but rather whether the employee is able to perform at their best or not. Now, if that means they need some type of assistive technology, so be it. That's a much smaller cost over not providing that equipment and having them performing at a lower level. So over time, I then started requesting various things, whether it's Braille displays, screen reading software, whatever it might be. And in fact, over time, I even went beyond and asked for Braille within the buildings and much more. Pretty much any accommodation I need, whether it directly affects my performance or not. Even some things like for mobility training, I've requested Google to pay for it and all of those things. And, Google they have never rejected any of those for me.
Wow, that's very important. That's very important. And jYOTSNA, people may be listening saying, okay, so how did she get that job? What happened?
Mm-hmm. It was kind of an interesting way how I ended up. So basically, when I was in college, trying to figure out what job I would go for, like I mentioned, I was struggling to use websites which were inaccessible. And at the same time, I ended up doing a project for the Disability Resource Center where I had to test software to see if it was accessible or not, because they were going to make the decision based on that, whether they were going to purchase that software to keep it in the center. And as I was doing this, I figured, hey, what if I could do this as a job? Then I could help make all these websites accessible so that other individuals need not suffer using such inaccessible sites. But the problem was, back then, most of the private companies did not have such a role in accessibility. There were some government-based companies, but at least I did not hear or could find many companies looking into accessibility. So I was trying to figure out what I would do. And a number of my professors were really impressed with my work. They said, hey, why don't you apply at Google? And actually, my mom wanted me to apply at Google because Google is right next to the company she used to work for. So she was like, we could carpool together. I'm like, Mom, dream on, okay? Dream on. And my professor said, jYOTSNA, you should apply to Google. I'm like, no, I will not apply to Google because I know I'm not going to get in, so I'm not going to set myself up for failure. I'm not applying. And they said, are you going to apply or shall we apply for you? I'm like, you know what? You want to set yourself for failure? You can do that, but I'm not going to apply, period. That's it. And simultaneously, my brother had a friend who used to work at Google. So he took a copy of my resume and he sent it to his friend and said, look, this is my sister's resume. You try to see if you can find this role she has built her resume about. If you can, fine. If not, fine. She doesn't know I'm giving you her resume. Just see if you can find something. And it just happened so back then, they didn't have a role at Google for accessibility. But there were a few individuals who had some insight, like they themselves were individuals with disabilities, and they had formed a group within Google who were like consulting group kind of a thing, where if anyone had any question about disability and accessibility, they could reach out to them. And my brother's friend knew about them. So he took my resume and gave it to them and said, look, this is an individual. So they took a look at my resume. They're like, huh. So I had made up a title called Accessibility Testing Specialist. They're like, this sounds something interesting. So they ended up doing interviews. And after a couple of rounds of interviews, they're like, okay, you know what? You have a job. And when I got hired, I was like, what job am I hired for? They're like, you made up the title, right? Accessibility Testing Specialist. That's the job you get. And for a few months after I joined, I was under that title till after that, they did some calibration and then they moved me into a test engineering role. But yeah, that's how I got into Google.
Wow. And people say, okay, so she works at Google, and what is a normal day for her at work? Can you tell us?
Sure. So one thing I really like is Google has a very good, at least a very good work-life balance. So mostly I wake up in the morning. I have a 6-year-old daughter. So generally I wake up around 6 o'clock. I do some exercise. I finish off cooking and then I wake up my daughter. I get her ready for school and she's out of the house. Then I take a shower, I get ready and I log in by around 9 a.m. or so. And I have days which are meeting intensive, days which are not that many meetings, but mostly so I have a team of testers who perform accessibility testing. So I manage that team. And every now and then I have meetings with them to consult with other product teams and all of that. Generally, I'm working till my daughter comes home, which is anywhere between 4:30 to 5 p.m. And that is when I log out and back to my motherly duties, taking care of her. Generally, once she's off to bed around 7:30, 8 p.m., I don't have a need. It's not requested, but I have a preference to log in and just check on certain emails and things like that and just finish off for the day. Yeah. Generally, I go to bed by 10. Yeah.
Very, very good. jYOTSNA, can you tell us some of the things you have done at Google that makes you feel very proud?
Well, there is two sides to that, in a sense. What I mean is there is something that is work related. There's also something which is not exactly related to my work, meaning bringing in. So one thing I'll say is, so when I started, there were individuals who are visually impaired. However, in terms of accommodations, it was provided as requested. So when I started, I had to be the one to request it before I received it. So over time, I said, this is not an ideal way that it should be. I feel like the perfect way is, let's say, for example, if somebody declares that they're visually impaired or blind, that a set of accommodations are provided to them or offered to them by default. Similarly, when a laptop is given to them on day one, that it has the required screen readers installed on there, as opposed to them, needing to go and purchase it, expense it, and then install it. So currently, that is the situation. So individuals who are visually impaired, more often than not, if they declare it, they are paired up with a mentor who either has experience of helping individuals with visual impairment or who themselves are visually impaired, so that from day one, they have a support system. Plus, they're also given, so I have had Google add on a mobility instructor into the HR system. I mean, they're not an employee, but they're in the system, so that if any visually impaired person wants mobility training, they can request the training and it will be provided and paid for. And similarly, I worked with many other members to get Braille into the building. So all the conference room names, the micro kitchen, all of those have Braille and have been made quite accessible. So all of these, I personally feel like, though they may not be like making products accessible, I feel like they make an individual with disabilities their life much easier when they're working. So I feel really happy and glad about that, because I've heard from other individuals who have joined after I have, who are visually impaired, and they're like, oh, it was a pretty seamless experience for us. Oh, we never thought there was somebody who's visually impaired who worked on getting this in. We would have just thought a corporate company would do that automatically, kind of a thing. So yeah, that's something I do feel proud about. Something else I would also say, when I started, like I said, accessibility was known to an extent, but wasn't so widespread. And now when I look at it, and so when I started, I had to chase after product teams to listen to me. And now it's a vice versa. They're reaching out to me saying, hey, we need your help about accessibility testing. I'm like, no, sorry, don't have time. Please grab some other time. So glad I'll be there to help you out. So I feel like that's a drastic change over time. Yeah. And of course, I know the work that we do and my team does, it directly affects the accessibility of many products which are used by individuals out there. So yeah, that definitely helps me go to bed happy.
Yes, I bet it does. I bet it does. I really applaud your efforts, jYOTSNA, for all the community, That's the type of people we need in this world for sure. jYOTSNA, I would like to go into Google's products a little bit, I was listening to a video.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They were describing a new service called Google Duplex, I believe, where you would see a virtual assistant making a phone call, talking to a lady on the phone, and requesting some reservations for I think it was for a restaurant or something like that.
Mhm.
That I believe uses, you will correct me if I'm wrong, artificial intelligence or something like that. But my
Mhm.
question to you, jYOTSNA, is that kind of service, do you think is the future in technology? Some of the things that are going to happen, like you're going to be able to say, okay, I have such a busy schedule today, but I need reservations for the opera tomorrow, and say to Google, okay, Google, blah, 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 and it will happen. Things like that are going to happen.
I would definitely think so. I feel like it's not only about the busy world, you would also think about it in an aspect of an individual with disability, right? For example, somebody who is paraplegic and stuff like that, they could perform certain actions using like Google Assistant and stuff that they wouldn't be able to otherwise, right? For example, controlling your thermostat and things like that, right? So I
Right.
feel like this is definitely the future. Like, I mean, when you see now, even now, many of the new homes being constructed, they have, either Google or Alexa or Siri all set up with the home so that you can control the whole house just using this technology.
That's very important, jYOTSNA. And I think Google Assistant is doing a great job. And I say that for our listeners because in my in my life in general, I use Google Assistant a lot on my smartphone and at home as well with the Google Home Mini, if I'm not mistaken, that's the
Mhm.
right
Yeah.
name. Um, and this technology is improving every day. And the same I say is happening in so many areas of life where you say technology is helping in ways that you never thought possible. I have in my family many people who are totally blind from birth, and
Mhm.
they didn't have access to this technology 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
So I read somewhere that it's a great time to be blind, you know? And yeah, because we have so many things that we can now achieve, and in it's also very fast to do many, many of these things. I remember seeing someone who was working with a smartphone in New York, and he was so fast doing things. And I said, "Oh my God, how do you do that?" And he
Mhm.
said, "Well, it takes practice, and you put the screen reader to a faster speed. You get used to that, and then you
Mhm.
can do things super fast." Do you use your smartphone with a very fast speech?
Um, I have seen other blind person their phone being much faster than mine. I would say mine is at a pace where it totally throws other people who are not blind off. And but however, I have heard from other individuals that my typing is probably faster, where I'm able to exactly touch on, like, when I lift up my finger and I put my finger on a character, that it's
Right.
generally just one off in a sense. And yeah, so
Now, many people listening may be thinking, all right, so what do we have to do to work at Google? Do you have any advice?
I would say, so there are a couple of, based on like when I have spoken to other individuals, them asking similar kind of question. One of the common question I get is they say, okay, what degree should I get,
Mhm.
or what job should I go into to get a job? I would say that is a rather wrong way to look at it,
Mhm.
because I personally feel like more than half, most of your waking hours, you're working, you're spending at your job. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're going to hate your life. So what is important is that you select a job that you enjoy and you like. And then figure out how that is going to work for you in terms of with your disability. Don't retrofit or adjust yourself to fit into a job, but make the job fit for you. And if you do well and perform well at what you're doing, I would say it doesn't matter whether it's Google, Apple, any of these companies, you will be able to find a job.
jYOTSNA, I have a question because what you are saying is important for our listeners. And I say, okay, let's say I apply to a job position, but from all the things they ask, I know how to do 8 out of 10. So there are 2 that I have no clue how to do those. What would you say to the employer in that situation? Because you really feel passionate about those 8 that you know, and you are willing to learn the other 2. What do you say?
So you, first of all, you would show how you shine really well in those 8. And then you would say you are a fast learner and that you are really good at what you're doing. So while you're learning the other 2, which you will be able to come up to pace, because you're a fast learner, you'll be able to get up to pace quite fast. In the meantime, you can help with the other skill set that you already have. And that there shouldn't be much of a difference that they notice in the meantime, because you're working on the others next. It's not like you're going to be sitting idle.
That's very important. Good advice, jYOTSNA. Now, I have maybe a complicated question, and this is spontaneous. You are not ready for this one. Okay, accessibility. What a wonderful topic. What an interesting topic. And I have a thought about it, and I want to share it with you. And it's this. Definitely, accessibility is improving a lot worldwide when it comes to smartphones, smart kitchen, websites, mobile applications, etc. What is my question, and it's hard to find an answer for me, but maybe you're going to help me out, is do you consider that accessibility will ever be the standard for technology? And in other words, let me put you an example. Let's say you go to the website of Michael Jackson, let's say, just to put a name. The website is accessible today. Okay, I come back 5 months ago and it's not accessible. When the ADA came on and started, and now that is working a lot in technology, and there are other norms and laws that help in terms of accessibility. So companies apply for that and help everything be more accessible. Do you believe everything should stay accessible? And is there a way to make that like happen? Or if something breaks and you have an accessible app, is working for 5 years and then the 6th year is not working, that's my concern a little bit, jYOTSNA, that yes, we progress, but sometimes we go back and we say, oh my God, everything was working, now it's not working. Why they touch it? What is your feeling about that?
I feel like you're absolutely right. I personally, I know I shouldn't say this in a sense, but honestly speaking, I do not believe we will ever get to a point where when a new product or new website is built or updated, that it will be accessible by default. I don't think we'll ever get to that point. And that's a sad thing about things, because accessibility is rather always seen as an after effect. It's barely ever seen from the get-go. It is deprioritized because this world, they want to move ahead. They want to move fast. They want to make it attractive and everything. They're not always thinking about accessibility. They always see that as an option. They don't see that as a requirement. And that's the sad thing about things. But the thing is, if you look at the flip side, if you were to say, okay, I would prefer that it stays outdated as long as it's accessible, that's also probably not the right thing, even for individuals with disabilities. Yes, it's probably great that it will be accessible, but do you really want to be lagging behind? Do you want to stay with the outdated website? Or do you want all the latest information and everything?
You're right. You're right about that. A very interesting point. And jYOTSNA, can you tell us what are the products of Google that you help managing in terms of accessibility?
So I can't really say I have self-managed, because the way that my role works is I manage a team of testers who perform accessibility testing for a wide range of product teams.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily where we are, directly, sculpting a product specifically like that. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Google Pixel smartphone? Because and for Google, I hope some of the people at Google are going to listen to this interview, because I have a question for you guys. I live in Colombia, in South America. We don't get the Pixel smartphones here, and it would be nice to get to know them here. And the market of smartphones in Colombia is such that one person has 2 or 3 smartphones, so it's a big market, and people are always thinking what's the latest, the greatest thing. So that's one thing to consider for Google here in Colombia. Can you tell us a little bit about the product, how it works? What's the accessibility like there?
Sure. So actually, I have 2 Google Pixel phones. One is a personal phone, one is a corporate phone. So right now, I'm actually talking on my Google Pixel phone. I would say, so it does have the various Android accessibility suite in there, such as you have voice access, speech access, you have talkback, all of that software, all of those features, which are in the settings that you can enable and use. I have been using this Pixel phones for I don't know how many years now. And I do definitely love it, and I find it very easy to use. Yeah.
What's the latest operating system of those smartphones?
If I'm not wrong, is it? I think I'm outdated.
Oh, that's funny.
It might be. I'm not sure. Is it Android 13 or 12? I'm not 100% sure. I get the automatic update, so I just update it. I barely ever check unless until I'm filing a bug that I found on my phone. Then I look it up. Yeah.
Right. Life is funny for listeners. jYOTSNA, I love your attitude. Can you tell us from where it comes, your good attitude about life that has helped you along the way?
I think there have been a couple of aspects, couple of things that have played a role. I don't know, my parents always say, they're like, we don't know how you got this, but since I was quite young, I always had this attitude in my mind where I am the person I am. I don't have to fit in with the people around me. What is important is that I am the person I'm happy with. And to a certain degree, I don't care what others think about me. If they don't like me, that's too bad. as long as I feel like I'm a good person, that I'm happy with. And I've always had this situation while growing up, people making fun of me in school. Oh, you look like this, you dress like that. I've always ignored everyone. And my parents are like, how can you ignore? And I'm like, well, this is my mindset. I feel like they're all stray dogs. You pay attention to a stray dog, it will bark more. You ignore it, it will eventually shut up. And that's kind of like how I have been able to get around people making fun of me in the different situations. While growing up, as you know, like, kids bully and everything like that. And I've always, my parents say, why do you have to dress like that? Why don't you dress? I'm like, Mom, why should I dress in any other way that I'm comfortable with? The way I'm dressed is totally appropriate. There's nothing wrong with it. Just because other people don't like it doesn't mean I have to change. I should be happy and satisfied with the person I am. And that is what is more important, as long as I'm not hurting others or making others sad. And my other mentality is also to set a goal for myself and accomplish it. Yes, there will be barriers. And if you're not able to accomplish the goal in time or the exact way you set it, that's fine. Do the next best you can. And that's kind of exactly what happened when I went to college. Is my goal was, okay, my parents are paying for my education. They're working hard to pay for my education. I should do my best to, first of all, complete my undergrad in 4 years, and to graduate with a good GPA. And that was my goal from the day I started college. When I lost my vision, I was like, okay, at least I know I cannot graduate in 4 years, but what's the next best I can do? That's why the moment I realized I lost my vision, my main focus was, how do I get back to college as fast as I can? Because I want to get back to accomplishing my goal.
JOSNA, did I ask you? I don't think I did. What did you study in college?
I was a business major with a focus in management information systems. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of breed like a crossover of business and IT.
Oh.
Like a computer science and yeah.
Oh, JOSNA, this question that I have on my mind, I have wanted to ask someone for about 2 years, and you are the right one for this. Let me see if I can ask it in a very simple way. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you are losing your sight and you understand that you need to learn how to use screen readers for the computer specifically, mm-hmm. How did you manage to understand where does a page starts? Where does a document starts? Where does the layout begins? In other words, how are you able on your mind to say, well, I don't see the screen, but at the right top of the screen, blah, 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 at the bottom, did you ever felt uncomfortable with that feeling, oh my God, where is the beginning of this? Because I don't see the screen. So am I in the middle, in the beginning? I don't know if my question makes mm-hmm. sense.
It does. So let me ask a counter question. Mm-hmm. How does it matter where's the top of the page, right? Because at the end of the day, your objective is, let's say, for example, you're on the Google homepage. Uh-huh. How does it matter what the top of the page is or what the bottom of the page is? Because my objective is, can I perform the search and can I access the results?
Okay, fair point.
For me, yes, initially it was very hard. Learning screen readers, I still remember my very first day, when I went to the training center, my trainer is also visually impaired. And my dad took me to the center. He introduced us, then he left me there. And my trainer took me to his office and he's like, just give me a second. I need to check something on my computer. He didn't have headphones on and his computer started talking, the screen reader, and I could not understand a single letter it said. I was literally in tears and I'm like, only if I knew the way, I would just run out of the center right now. Probably the only thing that kept me there is the fact that I didn't know my way around there. And then he started training, and about a month or so after, by the time I was done at the training center, I could understand what his computer was saying, even when he missed it.
Wow.
So I feel like in terms of learning this technology, the thing is taking it a bite at a time. Don't try to bite the whole thing at once. Take it at a step at a time. Don't try to think about the overall picture saying, oh, this is so slow. How am I going to get to the next point? How am I going to start? I would say focus on current situation. Take it at a piece at a time. And I would say you would learn, because I feel like every screen reader user uses their computer or will use a specific web page in a different way. What works for one may not work for the other. So probably learning the basics, starting from the basics, taking it step at a time, then you'll probably get to that point. If it is important for you to know what is at the top of the page, maybe you'll learn, okay, this website uses H1, which is the title of the page, which is at the top of the page. So you might then end up learning those kinds of tactics. Or just pressing Control Home to get to the top of the screen, that kind of a thing.
Now, jYOTSNA, my last question, because I would have many, many questions. It's a very interesting topic and person to interview for our listeners. It's been very, very appealing for me to do this interview. As I knew it would be, but it's been more than I thought, to be honest with you, jYOTSNA. So my pleasure. So my last question is, how can people talk to you guys at Accessibility?
So we do have some accessibility forms for each product. There is the feedback if you submit it with accessibility. So there is a team that looks into the feedback that comes in. They do filter through that, and then they put it in the right pipeline to their appropriate product teams and things like that. Plus, many times, we are also asked, is there any way that the individuals can contribute to testing products for Google and things like that? So you will find, if you Google search, Google Trusted Tester Program, you could also sign up for that. And when the opportunity arises, they will contact you requesting you to test out specific software. But yeah, these are the different avenues.
All right. So jYOTSNA, it's been a privilege to have you on. I understand how busy you are, so I truly appreciate your time here. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. And for our listeners, remember to smile and be happy. This is Alvaro from LVB Show saying good night.